Now we have an update of our milestone, the slow fill portion of the liquid oxygen transfer from the cryosphere that you see off in the distance there to the right-hand, lower right-hand part of the screen. You can see one of the cryospheres is now in fast fill. Again, liquid oxygen going into the rocket is now in fast fill as of 2 minutes ago, completing the slow fill portion of liquid oxygen into the core stage. And there you see one of the aft struts, which actually comes into play with regards to the liquid oxygen flowing in. That strut that you just saw, there's an aft strut constraint that requires that there be 50% filled liquid oxygen in the core stage tank, that they hold it at 50% rather until they have at least 5% liquid hydrogen over on the hydrogen side. So the propellants are carefully sequenced. There's a shot of it again. That's the aft strut. It connects the solid rocket boosters to the core stage, a very critical component of the Space Launch System. The rocket actually shrinks as these super chilled propellants go into it. And so there's motion there, very small amounts of motion. But in order to keep everything aligned and in good shape structurally, liquid oxygen won't go above 50% until we have, again, at least 5% liquid hydrogen in that tank. And so now that we are in fast fill for liquid oxygen, which is roughly double that of slow fill, a little more than double, we're going to be moving pretty quickly on the tanking of the liquid oxygen tank. And there you can see a shot of the core stage engines and the two solid rocket boosters to either side. 4 nozzles in all. 3 of them you can see. One of them is obscured by the engine in the front, right? This is the business end of the rocket. And an engineer is currently controlling that camera as they complete inspections throughout the process of countdown. There are more than 100 cameras trained on this rocket in various areas of the rocket, making sure that they have eyes on all of it as we proceed through the countdown. A note on the sensors, if you're wondering about going from slow fill to fast fill and how it detects where we are, similar to your car, your vehicle. If you have a gauge there that will tell you when it's empty, same thing exists on the core stage, which triggers a shutdown in flight once it reaches empty. The sensors inside the tank, they detect when certain levels are reached, and you want to slow the flow down as they are in fast fill. You want to slow it down to prevent burping of this liquid propellant out of the top, which would be a very bad thing. So you have cutoff sensors, which tell you when it's close to E, basically on your gas gauge. You have the 0 to 5% sensor, which is slow fill. And then there's a sensor that goes from 5% to 95%, and that is the sensor for fast fill. Once it gets up to the top, 95%, there's a sensor from 95% to 100%, and that puts the tanking into a topping, which is about half as fast as fast fill. So they slow it down as it gets up and fills up, and then there's 3 100% sensors, a 100 minus, a 100 even, and a 100 plus. And then that's when we get into replenish. There's software that cycles the valves to keep it in that sweet spot, 100 minus, 100, and 100 plus. And then, of course, replenish just replaces the propellant that boils off. These propellants, the moment they go into the tank, they are boiling. And they will continue boiling all the way through liftoff and during flight. They will be vented initially. That vent will be capped off to build up flight pressures. And then, of course, at the end, when the engines are lit, and this rocket is, if all things go well, racing into space at 1:04 p.m., 1:04 a.m., sorry, 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. We're currently 8 hours and 7 minutes until liftoff. This is Artemis Launch Control. Got a couple of notable milestones that are coming up in the cryogenic tanking of the Space Launch System. One that has just happened is the aft strut constraint has been verified. So we are over 5% hydrogen filled. And since we're in slow fill, we're now going to transition to fast fill. And this has been a moment in past tankings where we've seen leaks. But today the team is executing the kinder, gentler, as they call it, loading operation. It's a much slower, very methodical fueling, tanking of the liquid hydrogen tank. And so we'll let you know as soon as that milestone happens. After that, we will then have the liquid hydrogen engine bleed kickstart. The kickstart is essentially a bleed to get it going. They close the vent temporarily. The liquid hydrogen tank is vented. Since it is a liquefied gas, it's boiling off. It vents out the gas. They'll close that vent to pressurize the tank, and then a small amount of liquid hydrogen is bled through the engine, and that gets it going. And then after kickstart, they go to a vented bleed, but at a lower pressure. So they'll open back up the vent, and the bleed will run. And that bleed needs to run through the engines in order to properly condition it for launch. Needs to be in just the right temperatures, which match the propellants. So all those milestones coming up in a bit, and we'll certainly let you know as they happen. And a programming note, coverage of the EVA on NASA's media channel has completed. You are now watching coverage of Artemis I's tanking. The tanking of the Space Launch System and Orion and launch of the Orion spacecraft tonight at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time from the east coast of Florida. We are headed to sunset, as you can see from this shot here, in roughly about 23 minutes. Got some cloud cover overhead as we count down, currently at 7 hours, 56 minutes and counting until liftoff. We started our day here on NASA TV with the tanking go that we received from Launch Director Charlie Blackwell Thompson at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time. And we are currently flowing propellants on both the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen tanks of the Space Launch System. This is involves two steps here. We'll get the lower tanks filled, the largest tanks, and then we'll fill the tanks of the upper stage. Okay, and I'm hearing in real time, we are now transitioning from core stage LH2 slow fill to fast fill. So core stage LH2 is now in fast fill. The propellant teams closely monitoring the data. So we have both tanks now in fast fill. The liquid hydrogen tank holds 537,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen. The liquid oxygen tank close to 200,000. Okay, another big milestone coming up here. The engine bleed kickstart on the liquid hydrogen side is proceeding. Again, the engine bleed kickstart on the liquid hydrogen side of the core stage is now beginning. Again, this kickstart is a pressurized bleed to get it going, get it moving. Close the vent to pressurize the tank, and then a small amount of liquid hydrogen is bled through the engines there that you see at the bottom of the core stage. And then that hydrogen that's bled out is then taken out to a flare stack that burns it off. And with that wide shot, you can see we're getting close to sunset here on the east coast of Florida. In just about 7 minutes. And so far, so good. We are at L minus 7 hours, 36 minutes and counting until liftoff of the Space Launch System and the Orion spacecraft here from the east coast of Florida, the Kennedy Space Center. I'm joined now by Jeremy Graber, the Assistant Launch Director for the Artemis program. Jeremy, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Daryl. Happy to be here.
So, the countdown, we're just a few hours into it, and so far it seems awfully smooth. What's your take?
So we're doing really well right now. We're in the middle of our tanking operations. We picked up with those tanking operations just a few hours ago. Our launch director, Charlie Blackwell-Thompson, said some great words to our team, and they're actively loading cryogenic fuel into the core stage. So far, everything is going very smoothly, and we're about 25 minutes from coming out of our hold at T-minus 6 hours and 40 minutes. And we've got about an hour and a half of liquid hydrogen fast fill to go, and about 2.5 hours of liquid oxygen fast fill to go. Our teams are monitoring the progress of that loading, doing a great job, and things look really good right now.
The team seemed upbeat when I was at the MMT meeting. A lot of positive vibes all the way around. Charlie Blackwell-Thompson, launch director, didn't have a constraint when she walked into the room. And then, as you mentioned, things have been going pretty well. Now that we're in tanking, this is an area that we have seen issues in the past. The fast fill for liquid hydrogen, especially when we get into the bleed. We're currently in that kickstart bleed, but so far, so good. And there's a different loading operation that was used for this time.
Yeah, this team has done a fantastic job working through each of the different wet dress rehearsals and launch attempts. In addition, we did a tanking test that demonstrated a lot of updated procedures to deal with the challenges that we had seen previously. And this team has really been outstanding, finding the right sequencing, the right, basically keeping everything in a very tight box to ensure that we manage through any potential issues. And so far, everything that they've put in place has been going extremely well. And we'll just keep monitoring as we go.
Yeah, this is as close to the countdown as you lay it out on your bar chart, as they called, that I've seen through 4 wet dresses and 2 launch attempts, and this, of course, being the 3rd.
Absolutely, we are right on the timeline, which is, as a launch guy, that's where I want to be, right on the timeline.
That's right. Had to deal with a hurricane. Had to deal with 2. Obviously, the rocket was inside the VAB for 1, and for the 2nd, it was out there for tropical Hurricane Nicole, rather. So far to this point, have you noticed anything that you would attribute to the hurricane?
Well, so one of the really key things that we've been doing since Nicole passed through is to really investigate and look at all of our systems from a powered up perspective, as well as from an outside visual perspective. And we've been doing that from the minute we were able to really see that. We monitored all of our capabilities on the flight hardware and the ground systems throughout the storm, and we've been keeping a very close eye on everything since the storm made it through. And so far we've worked through any of the items that we found. I know some of those things have been talked about at the mission management meetings over the last couple of days. We came into call to stations for launch countdown. We had some work that we carried in. We've made it through all of that work yesterday, and we really have a clear constraints board at this point. Have not seen any issues associated with normal issues that may have come up, or from anything else. So, as I said, clear constraints right now and on the timeline.
That's one tough rocket out there, as come to find out. You mentioned the couple issues that were dealt at the MMT meeting, some of the RTV that came off the seal below Orion, and then along with a connector that was in the same location as a previous hydrogen leak. But you've got redundancy there, so you're good to go, and it looks like that is not going to be an issue as we proceed forward. we're headed to sunset. As you can see, sun just went down here at the Kennedy Space Center as the lights are on and illuminating the Space Launch System rocket. Getting an update. Engine stand by. So, Jeremy, we just heard from the NASA, from the liquid hydrogen team on the NASA test director's loop. They're reporting out right now. The engine bleed is complete. They did see a little bit of hydrogen in the area, a little bit of leakage, a little over 4%, but that apparently went down. That's within your range, right?
Absolutely, that's it within our range. That's you know, an expected leakage rate at that location, and yeah, as you mentioned, the great thing is wherever it got to at that 4%. Since I'm not looking at data right now, I'm
sure.
kind of, but the good thing is it started coming down as they completed the bleed. So that's exactly what we would expect to see, and based on that, it sounds like we're still doing great.
That seal in that quick disconnect, it has to conform, right, to that space there. And when you hit it with those cryos, that's kind of part of it, right? Just like you were saying. It's kind of
and our expectation through the rest of loading is that leakage rate will come down. That's really what we saw during the tanking test that we performed after the last launch attempt. And so we really do expect to see that leakage come down as we load the core stage tank, the liquid hydrogen tank, and you get more commodity on board. That will really help seal that, and we should see that come down.
All right, great news. Real-time update from our Assistant Launch Director, Jeremy Graver. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for being here, and good luck to you and the team the rest of the way.
Thanks, Daryl. Appreciate it.
All right, we are at L-7 hours, 28 minutes, and counting until liftoff. This is Artemis Launch Control. This is Artemis Launch Control. We are currently L minus 7 hours and 18 minutes until liftoff with a beautiful nighttime shot. Just a few minutes after sunset here on the east coast of Florida. There it is, the Space Launch System rocket illuminated against the night sky. We are currently in the middle of cryogenic tanking of the Space Launch System rocket. Its two largest tanks, liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. On this particular shot, I want to draw your attention to the far right-hand side of the screen. You can see the flame there. That is a hydrogen flare stack. That is part of the operation. That hydrogen flare stack takes the engine bleed, the hydrogen, the liquid hydrogen that is run through the engines, the RS-25 engines at the bottom of the rocket, to condition it for launch, get it ready at the right temperatures to light. After it runs through the engine, it then goes out to a flare stack, and there you see it burning. We are currently in a vented bleed configuration for liquid hydrogen, and we will stay in that until inside of terminal count. So this view will be with us for the duration. And just a note, the liquid hydrogen, it is burning, but it's not giving the flames the color. That's actually the impurities that get drawn in along the way, and they give the color, the orangish color of the flame. Now we have an update in terms of the tanking progress so far. We are tracking that with a real-time graphic that is taking data from both of the tanks of the core stage. This visual will allow you to see our progress. On the core stage liquid oxygen, on the left you can see we are at 35% full. Currently in fast fill. And over on the right, the core stage liquid hydrogen, the largest tank towards the bottom of the rocket, 40% filled. You can see the capacities, close to 200,000 gallons for liquid oxygen and 538,000 gallons for liquid hydrogen. We've got about a couple hours left to fill the liquid oxygen as it fills at a slower rate during fast fill. Across the bottom of the bar, you can see our progress as we head to the tanking of the upper stage. But again, just about a couple of hours left to tank the liquid oxygen, and just about an hour left on the core stage liquid hydrogen, as that one will fill faster than the LOX. We have about 5 minutes left in a pre-planned hold. And after that, we're going to put up our countdown clock so that you can see it. The hold time was roughly about 3.5 hours long, an extended hold. That's part of the longer operation to tank the liquid hydrogen side of the rocket. Our T0 for our launch today is at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time. We have a special launch broadcast that will start at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And that will happen right here on NASA's main channel. Operational commentary, which you're watching right now, will continue on NASA's media channel. You can find both of them on YouTube. We have a 2-hour launch window tonight, which the launch team likes having a long launch window just in case they run into some weather. But the launch weather officer has reported that we're 80% go for launch weather. It's not expecting to run into that tonight, and hopefully that holds. Throughout the night, we've been sharing the various stages of the Artemis I mission with you. And with just about 7 hours and 12 minutes left in the countdown, we want to take a look at the big moment, liftoff, and what you can expect to see on the Space Launch System and Orion.
During liftoff and ascent, SLS produces 8.8 million pounds of thrust to accelerate the rocket that weighs nearly 6 million pounds towards orbit. Approximately 2 minutes into the mission, the boosters will have consumed all of their solid propellant and are safely released. The rocket continues to propel toward orbit. After 3 minutes, Orion's service module fairings are jettisoned to lighten the load and expose its solar arrays, having completed their job protecting the arrays from aerodynamic forces. 40 seconds later, the launch abort system is jettisoned. Orion could safely abort at any time. About 8 minutes after launch, the SLS core stage engines shut down and the stage separates. The interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS, will give Orion the big push it needs to leave Earth's orbit and head toward the Moon. Orion's 4 solar arrays deploy to convert the sun's energy into electricity to power the spacecraft, charging its batteries for power when it moves out of direct sunlight. The upper stage engine ignites to elevate the spacecraft and fully enter Earth orbit, targeting conditions for the maneuver that will send Orion to the Moon. Engineers at Mission Control in Houston will perform one last check on Orion systems prior to committing to the Translunar Injection, or TLI. The TLI maneuver breaks the bonds of Earth's gravity and sets the spacecraft on a course for the Moon. The interim cryogenic propulsion stage fires the RL-10 engine to complete the TLI burn that lasts about 20 minutes and increases the spacecraft's speed to more than 9,000 feet per second. Following TLI, Orion is committed to a lunar trajectory just 90 minutes after launch. The Orion stage adapter that connected Orion to the upper stage of the rocket will remain with the interim cryogenic propulsion stage as Orion separates from the stage about 2 hours after launch. Then 10 small satellites known as CubeSats will leave the Orion stage adapter and use their own propulsion systems to go to destinations including the Moon to perform experiments and technology demonstrations.
And now we want to put up our countdown clock for you. This is the T clock that you see in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. This reflects the time that the launch team is counting down, but does not include a half-hour hold that we have coming up. So the actual time until launch is 7 hours and 8 minutes, but we are 6 hours and 38 minutes away from going into a half-hour hold. And then once that half-hour hold is finished, they'll go into terminal count and the final T minus 10 minutes. To learn more about Artemis I and our mission around the moon, go to our website at nasa.gov/Artemis-1. nasa.gov/Artemis-1. It's nighttime here on the east coast of Florida, and we continue counting down to liftoff. Currently in fast fill for both the core stage liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen tank. We've got another couple hours of that for the core stage. So far, the launch team not working any major issues. The range is go. Our weather is good, 80% go. Liquid hydrogen will finish in about an hour, and we'll be able to get started working the upper stage tanking. For now, this is Artemis Launch Control. And we are now half full of liquid oxygen. You're looking there at a shot of the liquid oxygen tank venting. That's super cold oxygen gas meeting the humid Florida air and turning into vapor. And there's a look at the numbers. On your left, you can see the core stage liquid oxygen is more than 50% full. Got about another hour and 20 minutes to go in fast fill. And then over on the hydrogen side, moving quick. More than 3/4 full. On a tank that is the largest liquid hydrogen tank ever made into a rocket booster. We also got an update from Johnson Space Center and the flight dynamics officer there. Passed to us through PAO. There are 40 cutouts in our 2-hour window tonight. These are times in which we cannot launch the Artemis rocket. This is down from the 56 cutouts that were reported just a couple of days ago, but these numbers are regularly crunched and examined, looked at. The cutouts range from anywhere from a second or two to about a minute. So they're not a big impact today on the 2-hour launch window that we have that runs from 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time to 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. We're looking at the bottom of the Space Launch System rocket, the core stage with the 4 engines, RS-25s, built by Aerojet Rocketdyne. Those are heritage engines that came from the Space Shuttle program. And you can see the liquid oxygen vent at the bottom of the rocket as well, wafting up. A water vapor that's chilled from the liquid oxygen meeting the air. The team is also configuring the upper stage of the rocket, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. Configuring its guidance and navigation. And at the very top, you can see the launch escape system, which covers up the Orion spacecraft, which is the spacecraft we're going to send around the moon with a launch tonight. And one of the major objectives is to bring that Orion back from lunar orbit faster and hotter than any human-rated spacecraft has ever returned back to Earth. And we now also understand that on this particular flight, it's been calculated that Orion's maximum distance from the Earth, once it gets into lunar orbit, is 268,553 statute miles. From launch to splashdown, the total number of miles is estimated to be 1,228,000, roughly. And Orion's going to get about 80 miles away from the moon. And we have cameras on Orion in which we hope to bring you that imagery should we have a launch this evening, or should I say early tomorrow morning. We're moving along well. Currently, we are 6 hours and 15 minutes on the T clock, 6 hours and 45 minutes on the L clock. This is Artemis Launch Control. you.